Well, let's go ahead and get a drink, and then we'll kind of get it kicked off.
Cool. Oh, we got some fancy glasses.
Yeah.
Let's start out with, let's see here. I'm sure, have you had all these?
I've had the Master's Keep. I haven't had the Diamond.
Cool.
I
Yeah.
haven't
had the 101 Rye yet.
We'll say that one for last.
I haven't had any of them.
Perfect. Well, let's get this one out first then.
This podcast of Bourbon Pursuit is in partnership with thewhiskeywash.com, a lifestyle website for news and reviews for people who like whiskey, and for those who think a life without whiskey has no style. Thewhiskeywash.com. Welcome back to another episode of the Bourbon Pursuit podcast. My name is Kenny, and I've got Ryan here with me also. And Ryan, there's a really awesome news that just kind of came out kind of recently, and it was one of our past guests, Marianne Barnes, finally made the big announcement of what we all waited for. We even asked her during our podcast interview, and go ahead and spill the beans, kind of talk about what she did.
Well, it was formerly known as the Old Taylor Distillery. They finally got their own brand, and I think it's pretty cool. It's called Castle and Key. It kind of goes with the theme of, the distillery is a castle, and then there's a spring that kind of flows into the distillery that kind of shaped like a key. So I think it's pretty cool. I'm kind of interested how they'll do the bottle design, because there are a couple brands out there already with, the key kind of design, Larceny and Blade and Bow. So
yeah, a lot of those have a lot of the same kind of characteristics when they try to think about the name to it. So maybe are they running low on names to kind of choose from and ideas? But
we should start our own branding firm. I think it's a good name, and I'm interested to see how the bottle design and all that comes out. So.
I agree. But today we are not talking about Castle and Key.
No.
Today we are talking about something that is as we were kind of talking about in the pre-recording of the show, very traditional Americana brand that's been around for a long time, and that today is Wild Turkey. And today on the show, we have Matt Gandolfo. Matt is the brand ambassador for Wild Turkey. So, Matt, welcome to the show.
Hey,
welcome.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Finally, it's about time.
Oh, man. Yeah, it's about a year in the making right now. Hard to pin me down a little bit.
I understand.
I know. You've been traveling quite a bit. I saw you on a bus or something like that, too.
Yeah. 2015, I was on the road 31 weeks. So the 31-week tour across America, went everywhere from the West Coast to the East Coast, everywhere in between. So it was great going out there representing the brand. We had a mobile distillery is what we were calling it. So it's basically a tricked out coach bus with the breakdown of the process, a tasting room, a bar, so I could do education with bartenders, different clients, different accounts, but also have a little fun and go to places like Bonnaroo and Austin City Limits and dish out some wild turkey.
Okay. I was going to ask what your coolest stop was, but I think you already said it. I mean, it's hard to beat that. I mean, nothing better than a bunch of wild turkey at a music festival in the middle of summer. I'm sure that went well.
We were a popular spot, and it was my first Bonnaroo. And growing up in Kentucky, obviously you hear about Bonnaroo a lot, and I had a perception, and I went there. Man, it was unbelievable. I lucked out though. I didn't have to camp out or anything. I was able to go to a hotel at night.
You're in that nice little for travel distillery.
Oh yeah, man, that's AC at least. It was about 100 degrees out there, so a lot of sweaty hippies coming in for some bourbon.
It's kind of how it works. I remember my first Bonnaroo. It was camping out, sweating, kind of like struggling.
Paying for showers.
Oh yeah, it was gross, but it was fun, right?
Yeah,
it's always something you always hold tight.
Do it while you can, right?
Yeah,
that's right.
Exactly. So we always start the show out talking about the question we always kind of pose, which is, tell us about your first encounter with bourbon.
Yeah, I mean, I think anyone who grows up in the state, it's hard to pinpoint your first encounter per se, because this grows up around us. It's part of our culture. So, it's one of those things that we might take for granted a little bit. But as you grow up, and when I went off to Ohio for college, I realized, not everyone's drinking bourbon. They're, all the 18, 19-year-old, I should say 21, 22-year-old kids are much more comfortable drinking vodka and things like that. Well, that's when I first realized, this is something that Kentucky has, and it's special, and it's something that it means a lot to what we do in our state. So that's when I really start realizing this is something that I'm super interested in. When you think about what you want to do for a career, people always say when you're growing up, you want to do something you love. Well, my first jobs out of college, I worked for the family real estate firm. So I did real estate for a few years, and you realize that, I mean, it's great to pay the bills, but you're not going to work excited every day. So,
You're not traveling to Bonner and
yeah,
handing out whiskey samples.
Yeah, a little different story. So, I really did some soul searching, and one of the things I love most in this world is Kentucky, and there's not a market for a 6'1", 250-pound jockey out there. So I wasn't gonna go in the horse business, and the banjo, I bought one off Craigslist, and it's harder than it looks. So bourbon was an obvious choice for me.
Your fingers aren't fast enough.
No, not too good. But it's fun to go back and think about those first times, thinking about, man, what am I going to do? Because obviously anyone who grows up in Kentucky wants to be in the bourbon industry. So if it wasn't for the help of some people and getting my foot in the door at different places, I wouldn't be where I am today. So I'm very, very fortunate there.
Nice.
We'll kind of talk about, what your role consists of and what you do on a day-to-day basis for those sort of things.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very unique role. I'm being pulled in a lot of different directions. Right now, since I was on the road all of 2015, pretty much, we're putting a lot of emphasis on the home state. I'm going to the top 50 on-premise accounts in Kentucky during the week. So Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, I'm visiting accounts in Louisville and Lexington and Northern Kentucky, and just making sure that people know that Wild Turkey is a very traditional brand, as you mentioned. Wild Turkey 101 is known by almost everyone, but it's nice to show off things like Rare Breed. Rare Breed is actually the best-selling barrel-proof bourbon on the market right now. We got a 35% increase in sales last year of that one brand. Beautiful product. Russell Reserve, a lot of times people don't associate Wild Turkey with Russell, so it's great to be able to talk about what makes that different and kind of what we are besides Wild Turkey 101 bourbon.
Yeah, everybody knows the 101, and I'm always get refreshed with it when I go on Southwest airplanes because 101's on there, and it's always a treat to get it. Kind of talk about the 101. Why is it 101 and not 100 or 90?
Yeah. I mean, we've been in Lawrenceburg, Kentucky, on the site where the distillery is at. We've been making bourbon there since the late 1800s. So, throughout the years, it went through different names. The Rippey brothers had it for a while. Prohibition hit, and then they were struggling for an identity after Prohibition came, and they're still making bourbon, just some private labels, things like that. Well, a distillery worker, his name was Thomas McCarthy, he went to the warehouse one day before a wild turkey hunting trip in South Carolina. And just like we do when we go to the lake with our buddies, someone brings the food and someone brings the drinks. Well, he's in the bourbon business, so he's going to bring some bourbon, obviously. So he got his barrel thief out, siphoned out some bourbon straight from the barrel, took it on the trip with him. Well, that next year, his buddies were calling and said, you better bring that wild turkey bourbon again. And sure enough, the proof when he pulled out of the barrel was 101. So that really stuck and became kind of a tradition by accident.
So that's how the name originated, right? So I guess from there, the name originated, but how did it grow into a business?
Yeah. I mean, at that time, people were searching for brands that stuck, and that one really seemed to resonate with the consumer at that point. It was a little bit higher proof, a little bit more robust than other barrels on the market. We stayed really, really consistent throughout that time. That was in the 40s, and really the age, the filling techniques, everything stayed the same. So I think people respect that kind of consistency, and in the bourbon industry right now, everyone's scrambling to make their barrels go longer, age it a little bit less, maybe add a little bit more water here and there, just get a few more cases out of each barrel. Well, Jimmy Russell, our master distiller, he was handing the keys to Wild Turkey, and the last thing he's going to do is change anything. He learned by a guy by the name of Bill Hughes, and Bill Hughes was his mentor, and he'll never change anything in the operation that Bill Hughes taught him. So, a few things that stick out in my mind. We advertise that we won't release a barrel of bourbon under 5 years old. Personally, I've never seen a barrel released under 6 years old. And it's an extra 2 years compared to other people's flagship brands that does a lot as far as the aging process. To get really technical, I love our barrel filling proof. Legally, you can fill a barrel at no higher than 125, and almost everyone fills up at 125 to get the most out of those barrels, as I mentioned. Well, we're filling up between 107 and 112 proof. So what that does is in the final product, when it's done aging, we're adding far less water to the final product. So you get much more of the barrel tones in there. It's one of those things that might seem like a small thing, but I think it goes a long way as far as the final product. And it really helps that rye pop out. We're known for a high rye mash bill. So if you ever try one of our competitors, one of their flagship 80 proof brands. It's going to have, a little bit sweeter flavor to it, where Wild Turkey has that kick, that spice that comes out from the rye.
Well, it's the kickin' turkey, right?
Yeah,
That's
right. The kicking chicken. You can't fit that, yeah.
So that's a good little history lesson. So another good thing that we always read of, and if you saw some of the older labels, you always saw the name Austin Nichols. Mm-hmm. So what did Austin Nichols mean to Wild Turkey?
Yeah, I mean, Austin Nichols used to own the brand when it first came around. So it really started out as an importer of fine groceries worldwide. So it first got into the spirits business, and Wild Turkey was one of those flagship brands for a long time for them. And going back to the tradition of the operation, well, Austin Nichols was on the bottle when Jimmy first started. So for a long time, he didn't want to change that. He wanted to pay homage to our past and make sure people know that Austin Nichols played a role in our operation for a long time. We went on from Austin Nichols to Pernod, and now we're owned by Campari. But that was always a tradition we wanted to keep on there until recently.
So why was the big motivating factor behind removing the name of Austin Nichols? Yeah. Because we all know that we've interviewed plenty of people, and there's always this thing of we got to hold strong to tradition. We've got to keep hold to our roots. But then there's also these things that we have to embrace. New cultures. We have to understand that marketing plays a huge role in today's society. So was that part of the reason of removing it?
Yeah, I think it represents a new day and age for Wild Turkey. There's some things that we'll never compromise on as far as the operation, but marketing is an easy thing you can tweak. And Austin Nichols is not resonating with people as much as it once was. And it's one of those things that as we started changing the labels, and we have a whole new label set for not only Wild Turkey, but for the Russell lineup as well. It was a change that wasn't necessary, but we thought it fit the brand image a little bit better moving forward. So, Austin Nichols has been out of the picture for a long while, moving forward and focusing more on Lawrenceburg, Kentucky, and the Russell family.
Right. Now, we talked about a little bit about what makes Wild Turkey unique, right? Being able to say we put it in the barrel at a lower proof to be able to get more of those tones. What are some of the other things that Wild Turkey, through the aging process, distilling process, the grains, everything that goes into the heart and soul of the product, about what makes it unique comparative to other brands that are out there?
Yeah, I mean, I know a lot of people are going to stainless steel stills right now, and the problem they're having is that if it's not an all copper still, well, it's not pulling out those fusel oils, the methanol and things like that. So we are still all copper. What happened when everyone switched over to a stainless steel column still was, well, they found out real quick they weren't getting the quality they wanted. So a lot of these people are stuffing full of copper wire, trying to get that copper in there somewhere. Well, we've had the same design ever since we started making it. It's a 53-foot tall column still, 19 separation plates, and we actually just got a brand new one put in a couple of years ago, still made by Vendome right here in Louisville, Kentucky. So all copper is a big thing that we do. Also the grains. It's very, very rare to find anyone who uses exclusively non-GMO grains, something we're extremely proud of. Our corn for the past 40 years has come straight from Baghdad, Kentucky. So same corn supplier for a long while. It's really hard to find non-GMO rye in the United States. So we dip into Northeast Germany, hand select it, import it back over. And then our barley, like most people, comes from the heartland, the Dakotas up there up north in the Midwest.
So what does a non-GMO give you in regards to the experience and the taste versus something that is GMO, right? Because
free.
I mean,
that's always one of those things because
sure.
I mean, there's always like you said. I mean, you can't even walk into a Kroger or a Piggly Wiggly or wherever you are in the country, and you have to go to the one aisle that they only have maybe one aisle with like 7 or 8 shelves that is the kind of like the non-GMO, the whole whatever it is, right?
Yeah. And that's a hot topic, even past bourbon right now. I mean, you turn on the news like you said, and people are talking about non-GMO. Is it really that big a deal? Could we sustain our way of living right now without GMO grains? And I can understand the argument there. Really, for us, it means, hey, we're holding true to our roots. I've gotten in a number of conversations on the road about this, and people are pretty adamant about it's not that big of a deal, which I can understand that. But if it's not that big of a deal, well, why does the European Union say you can't send whiskey over here to sell unless it's all non-GMO grains? So most distilleries around here, they're hauling in the non-GMO grains for the European market, and then switching over to the cheaper grains, the GMO grains for the domestic market. So, if anything, it adds consistency to our product. And, globally, we're going to have the same quality product as we do in France, as we do in the United States of America. So, and really, it comes down to Jimmy. I mean, Jimmy's 83 years old now. He's the longest tenured master distiller in Kentucky. He's been doing it for 62 years. He doesn't even know what GMO means. You think he's gonna switch over? He calls it generically modified. So he doesn't want why fix it if it ain't broke type thing. Right. So we'll spend a little more money to keep the consistency in the product and make sure that we're not cutting any corners whatsoever.
So what's it like hanging around Mr. Jimmy Russell? Because he's got a lot. It seems like just from what we've seen at events, is he's just a character, like full of energy, just a great person to be around.
The dude is an absolute rock star. I've never seen anything like it. I mean, at his age, he's still traveling, 50% of his time pretty much. He goes to the distillery 7 days a week. What he'll do is he'll just post up in the visitor center and have people, come up to him and sign bottles. So he's a true master distiller, but an ambassador for the whole industry. So, my first job in the industry was with Jim Beam, and that's where I really start hearing about the Russell family, because Fred Noe and his father Booker had such great respect for him, and Jimmy always talks about Booker Noe. I mean, they were best buds. They really were the ones that spearheaded where the industry is now, I think, as far as hitting the road and doing Whiskey Fest and going down the tails of the cocktail and being that face of the brand. So they really were part of an unbelievable generation of distillers. I mean, Jimmy always says, his best friends were Booker Noe from Jim Beam and Elmer T. Lee from Buffalo Trace and Parker Beam at Heaven Hill. So just to be a younger guy in the industry and just shut up and listen to him, right. I mean, it's an unbelievable experience that I don't take for granted one day. I remember the first time we did a tasting together, my wife was on the side. She snapped a picture of us, and I went home that night and I framed it just because I know one day I'm going to look back on that and be like, I was working side by side with Jimmy Russell. So it's been a really cool experience. Eddie has become a co-master distiller. Eddie Russell is Jimmy's son, and he's been working side by side with Jimmy for 36 years. Just last year became a co-master distiller. So he's starting to take over a lot of responsibility as far as traveling a little bit more, and Jimmy's given a little leeway as far as releasing some of his own products. One we're sipping on as we speak right now is Master's Keep. And Master's Keep was Eddie Russell's first solo release. Before then, Jimmy always wanted to have final say in there. Well, Jimmy said, you know what, Eddie, you do your thing. And what's cool about this, it's the oldest bourbon we've ever released, 17 years old. And Jimmy is such a traditionalist, he never wanted to creep past the 12, 13-year mark. So this kind of shows you the direction our brand's heading, more LTOs, a little bit older. And, Eddie has a different palette, so a little bit more diverse portfolio for us.
I was about to say, if it was creeping past him, I guess at the 12 or 13-year mark, somebody must have been hiding barrels by him because he had no idea that they even existed.
Yeah. And that's the cool thing about this product is we actually, we were talking about Old Taylor before. Well, we had some warehouses, some stone warehouses over there on that property for a long while. So this initially got started getting aged in a wood warehouse, traditional rick house. We shipped it over to the stone warehouses to see how they would churn out. So they kind of started out as an experiment in a way. And it's fascinating that this is an 86.8 proof alcohol, and it's barrel proof. So when's the last time you heard of an 86.8 proof barrel proof? Well, what happened was in the stone warehouse, it would heat up in the summer days, the barrel would expand like the normal aging process, and all that angel share would leak out, all that moisture. Well, it couldn't escape from the stone. It was a tighter seal. So it all hovered on the top of the roof. Well, when nighttime rolled around, all that moisture actually dropped back into the barrel. So it's a very unique product. It's something that you won't see in very many places. So it's kind of a cool story about how we even got to that 17-year mark. Worked out well for us.
I think that's interesting. I think that should lead us into our next segment where we actually talk about some of the individual brands themselves. Yeah. So we have a few different ones, and you go on the shelves and you see by and large 5 or 6 different brands that are just right there in front of your face. So give us a kind of a rundown of what we're looking at on the shelf and what are the differences, whether they're minute or great, between each one of them.
Yeah. I mean, first off, from the 40s to 1976, the only thing we made at Lawrenceburg was Wild Turkey 101. So one product. In 1976, our first expansion project, believe it or not, was American Honey. So that was the first flavored whiskey ever hit the market in the United States. And, it's cool to see when you go down the liquor aisle now, well, everyone's got a honey bourbon. Everyone's got some kind of flavored bourbon. Well, that's the first one. So kind of really set the pace for the industry well before its time. And we'll start with that one. American Honey is a little different just because we actually use real honey. It's real cane sugar. It's not a processed flavor. It's a natural ingredient. Goes along well with our non-GMO theme. And that one, obviously, for the traditionalists, is a little sweet. So
qualified Whole Foods.
Exactly. And we're getting our certification right now, so you might see on the shelf here pretty soon. But it's one of those things for a traditionalist. I just never paid much attention to it, but when you see how much effort goes into it, it's pretty impressive. It's a great way for people who are just starting to drink whiskey to kind of creep into the category. So that's a great one for people who haven't been going after bourbon ever since they're 20 years old.
And they want something
else. Yeah. So that one was our first expansion project. As the times went on, our 81 proof option for bourbon came in, and that one really, our thought process was, it'll be perfect for the on-premise accounts. People who are mixing cocktails. It's not as robust as 101, so it'd be a great mixer for a lot of people. So it's the exact same product as 101, just a lower proof point at that point. So still, 5 to 8 years old. We cross-section our barrels the same way. So we pull our barrels from different parts of the warehouse when we're blending it. So really very little difference. When you take a sip of the Wild Turkey 81, I think you get a really light wood sugar on the front end, and then that spice from the rye really starts to creep in the back end. So it's still complex, even though it's a lower proof. Russell Reserve is our premium line, named after Jimmy Russell, obviously, and that line came about. Let's see, about 17 years ago when Jimmy was celebrating his 45th year in the industry. And what was going on is everyone thought he was going to retire. So it was kind of a send-off product, and it went over so well. He liked it so much, he said, well, I'll stick around for 17 more years. So, that one is kind of an anomaly in my mind for our portfolio because all our other products, I pick up that spice. I could see that rye really come out and be evident. Well, that's the one that has a lot of consistent caramel vanilla tones to it. It's a 10-year-old small batch. So for us, a small batch means anywhere from 150 to 200 barrels. So it's relatively small the number of barrels still. He selects the barrels, him and Eddie do. So the blending process is very strategic, and to get that consistent flavor where it's a great sipping bourbon. It's one of those you just fill up neat and just sip on it for half an hour, 40 minutes with a cigar. So I think that one's very approachable for someone who's past that first stage of bourbon drinking and they want to kind of creep up to more premium brands. That one's very, very approachable.
What's that one bottled at?
So that one's bottled at 90 proof, our small batch.
But there's also single barrels of it too, right?
Yes.
I mean, I've gone around to plenty of stores and you see a single barrel selective of Russell's Reserve.
So single barrel is great. Obviously when people come over and pick out their barrels individually, the last thing we want to do is for them to pick out a barrel that they love and then just add tons of water and they don't get the same product they picked out. So what we do for the Russell Reserve single barrel line is we bottle it at 110 proof. So a much higher proof point, and it's non-chill filtered. And I just love the non-chill filter stuff because all those yummy corn oils and things like that are still in there. So the texture is a little bit thicker, and it obviously has a little bit more velocity to it because of the higher proof point. And a lot of times you'll see a single barrel creep away that's 11 or 12 years old instead of the standard 10-year-old for the Russell Reserve.
There's a few other brands. So talk about Kentucky Spirit.
Yeah, that was actually one of the first single barrel bourbons that ever hit the market. So much like the flavored brands we talked about, we were well before our time there. Well, Kentucky Spirit and Blanton's came out right around the same time in the early 90s. So a new concept for a lot of people, and for the first time, people can actually see what barrel it came from on the bottle. So if they fell in love with barrel number 1052, well, you have to go on a little treasure hunt and find that same Kentucky Spirit. It's really kind of a single barrel version of Wild Turkey 101, still 101 proof. At the very minimum, it's 8 years old. I've seen some 9-year-old, 10-year-old barrels out there, but it was a good, it was a good introduction to get people understanding that premium bourbon's coming, and it was a good flag in the ground for us to start that out with.
It also has a unique bottle shape to it. It's kind of almost like a Four Roses, but almost kind of like a blooming flower. If you will.
What we're going for is kind of like when a turkey spreads its feathers. So, so when you look at that, you'll see kind of the
makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's kind of people love that bottle, and it's one of those that definitely sticks out behind the bar. So for that bottle to be still going strong for as long as it's been around, because everyone rebrands, and it's cool to see the Kentucky Spirit bottles. When you go into Silver Dollar in Louisville on Frankfort Avenue, man, they got Kentucky Spirits from the 90s all lined up. So it's cool to see the transition really hasn't changed all that much as far as the packaging for that product.
So what about Rare Breed?
That's my favorite.
I mean, you're not the only one. I'm right there with you. I love Rare Breed. Once again, coming from Jim Beam, my barrel proof of choice for a long time was Booker's, and Rare Breed and Booker's were the first two to hit the market as well for barrel proofs. So those came out side by side pretty much. It really kind of shows you what I was talking about as far as the barrel filling, because with Jim Beam filling up at 125 proof, man, you get some Booker's that will come out at 130, 131. Well, with us filling up at 107 for our Rare Breeds, usually the proof point is between 108 to 112. So it's a little bit more drinkable. When I drink my Booker's, I put an ice cube or two in there to open it up. But for Rare Breed, it's a barrel proof bourbon that I can sip on neat. It's very complex. It's a mixture of 3 different ages, actually. So we'll take 6-year-old, 8-year-old, and 12-year-old barrels and blend them together. And what we're looking for when we taste those batches, we want a strong, flavorful front end. So a lot of heat on the front end, and if you let it sit in your palate and chew on it, the Kentucky Chew, that's what Booker came out with. Yeah, if you chew on it a little bit, well, it'll kind of open up in your palate and get much smoother on the back end. So, traveling around that bus last year, the 2 mainstays were Wild Turkey 81 and Rare Breed. Well, you get some people who have never tried bourbon before, and they tried 81, and that back end with the rye, well, it was something that made them think it was 150 proof. You would have thought you gave them Everclear. Well, when they tried Rare Breed, even though the front end's so strong, if you let it develop on your palate, the back end's so smooth and sweet. So it's one of those that I'm very proud of, and it's one of those that's been underappreciated for a long time. It's been one of the best kept secrets in the industry in my mind. But like I said before, we're really starting to see a lot of growth in that brand.
And then last one, Forgiven.
Oh yeah, everyone loves the Forgiven story. So, Forgiven was an absolute accident. Should have never happened. We're one of 2 distilleries in Kentucky that traditionally made a rye whiskey as well. So, back then it was 5 or 6 years ago. We only dumped rye maybe 2 or 3 times a year. Well, one of the rye days, someone forgot to switch the valve over, so they ended up dumping the rye on top of a bunch of 6-year-old bourbon. So at that point, this poor girl thought she was going to lose her job. So she calls Eddie, because she knew she better not tell Jimmy quite yet. She calls Eddie and tells him what happens and apologizes. And Eddie said, let's calm down. Let's give it a try and see what it tastes like. It's pretty damn good. So it ended up being 78% 6-year-old bourbon, 22% 4-year-old rye. And when Jimmy found out about it, well, he wasn't too happy still. He wanted to call it Unforgiven. And Clint Eastwood's people called and said, "You can't do that. We got that trademark." So Forgive is what we landed on, and it was a great success story. She's kind of a local celebrity right now. They gave her the first bottle off the line.
She went from zero to hero.
Oh, big time! No pun intended. But what still ruffles Jimmy's feathers is one day someone came into the distillery and bought a bottle of Forgiven, and they see this older gentleman sitting in the corner in the visitor center that happened to be Jimmy. Well, she walks up and says, "Excuse me, sir, do you know the woman who invented Forgiven? I want her autograph." So Jimmy got a little jab there. But,
nice.
It's worked out great for us. It sold so well initially that we actually did 2 runs of it. But whatever you see on the market right now, that's it. So,
really?
Yeah. Because, rye whiskey is playing a bigger role in our operation, and I think you're going to start seeing a lot more rye whiskey everywhere. We ran out of our rye 101 for a long time. because of the forgiven mistake. So we pulled it from off-premise accounts for about 2 years and only focused on the on-premise accounts. You're going to start seeing a lot more on shelves everywhere, though. So the Rye 101 is one product we haven't talked about yet that is killing it right now. You know, as I mentioned, I went to Tales of the Cocktail in New Orleans last year. And for those of y'all who don't know, it's a big industry event. It's a big emphasis on bartending. So some of the best mixologists in the country are coming in. And with the non-GMO and the proof point for Wild Turkey 101, it really pops out in a cocktail. So these bartenders are taking traditional bourbon cocktails like Old Fashions and Manhattans and using rye whiskey instead to give it a little more character. So we're seeing a big push for that.
Yeah, I noticed that. And there's also a Russell's Rye,
Yes,
right?
yes.
So kind of talk about that one as well.
Yeah, our Russell's Rye. So our Wild Turkey Rye is a little bit older than most ryes in the market. It's a 4-year-old rye, where a lot of people who make a rye whiskey hang around the 2-3 year mark. So a little bit older. So it's for someone who drinks bourbon all the time. It's a great transition to the rye whiskey world. You know, there's some rye whiskeys out there. You take a sip of it, and that rye is a little bit too evident.
Spearmint,
yeah,
like.
for sure. And the thing about aging a little bit longer is all those wood sugars start absorbing in the rye whiskey, so it's a little bit better balanced in my mind. And for Russell's, we'll go 6 years. So it's a 6-year-old rye whiskey. So once again, a little bit sweeter on the back end of there, and it's one of those that I don't necessarily mix very often. I'm starting to drink my rye on the rocks or need a little bit more. So it's a little more of a premium rye whiskey, and we're super excited this summer for the first time. We're doing a single barrel rye program. So just like accounts coming in and picking out barrels of Russell Reserve single barrel and Kentucky Spirit, well, they're actually going to come in. We have 50 barrels of Russell Reserve 6-year-old rye single barrel that they can select. So it's nice to expand the single barrel portfolio a little bit more and offer that to different accounts.
And before we talk about something else that's a premium one, talk about the last premium release before the Masters of Keep, which was the Diamond Anniversary Edition.
Yeah. Just like I mentioned with Russell Reserve initially coming out to celebrate Jimmy's 45th anniversary in the industry, well, 60 started creeping up on Jimmy, and Eddie kind of had a secret plan for him. So he wanted to surprise Jimmy and have the Diamond Anniversary, since 60 is the Diamond Anniversary, obviously, edition Wild Turkey. So this one, through all its development, was supposed to be 16 years old completely. Well, at the very tail end, the cat got out of the bag, and Jimmy found out about it. He said, Eddie, I don't like anything older than 13 years. So he made Eddie put a few 13-year-old barrels in there. So it's a mixture of mostly 16, but it has some 13-year-old barrels in there, kind of a subtle nod to Jimmy's, I don't want to say stubbornness, but he's pretty steadfast. Traditionalist. Yeah. So, this one came out a couple years ago. It's 91 proof. It has a much more of a wood tone to it, I think. I think with the proof point being a little bit higher than the Master's Keep, it has a little bit more character to it in the back end.
Now, you had hinted at the very beginning of the show, and you're going to kind of let us drop this bomb. So if you want to, go ahead and kind of talk about the new release that's going to be coming here in May.
Yeah, so it's going to be a similar packaging to the Master's Keep bottle. It's actually the second edition in the Master's Keep collection. It's going to be called Decades. So we took some barrels that we left into the warehouse from the Master's Keep initially, the 17-year-old barrels, let them age a few more years, and this one's actually going to be a blend of barrels 10 to 20 years old. So a little bit of every age in there, which I've never heard anyone doing that before. I haven't got a chance to try. I'm trying it here in about a month before we release it, but I'm super intrigued to see kind of the flavor profile that comes off there, and then if you pick up the complexity of different ages. But we're super excited. It's 104 proof, so a little bit higher proof than what you're used to with the other LTOs. It's going to be interesting to see how it goes in the market.
Well, interesting. So this one's going to be for Ryan, because we all know that Ryan loves anything that's past the 1990s. And when you start looking around on forums and people are talking and these Dusty Hunters, there's always something that was kind of I don't know if you would call it a trademark or a quote that people said. They always say that older turkey is better turkey.
Yeah.
And do you have any kind of insights of why somebody would think that?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like someone saying the good old days, I remember back then when turkey was turkey. But, in reality, as I mentioned before, we've kept everything as consistent as possible. The only thing that I could really attribute to that change is, the whole industry is becoming, more computer generated. It's not someone churning steam valves anymore. It's someone sitting behind the computer. Our operators are very highly respected. It's actually the hardest job to get in the distillery. If you want to be in the first shift distilling team at Wild Turkey, you have to be there for 40 years. So they definitely know what they're doing. But as computers play a bigger role in the operation, there's going to be subtle differences.
Yeah, it's more science than art.
It really is. And that's what you're starting to see. Before the master distillers were guys that worked their way up in the industry. Well, for the first time, you're starting to see internships with U of L and UK. And you got chemical engineers that want to come in and be that second wave of master distillers. So the whole industry's changed a little bit in that respect. Efficiency and consistency is the name of the game right now.
Well, and products are much better and consistent now, but you might not just have those hidden gems like you did, or you might have stumbled upon back in the day.
For sure, yeah. And that kind of goes into our aging too, because we don't temperature control our warehouses at all. And I can understand why a lot of distilleries are starting to do this, because they want as consistent a product as possible. But I still get excited when you get a really cold winter day in January. You start thinking like, man, this might change the barrels a little bit. Or, if we have a really hot streak in the summertime, it's aging differently in our warehouses. So in a way, consistency is great, but nothing's better than picking out that one single barrel that tastes better than anything you ever tried before. And all of a sudden you have a 150 bottle limited edition of your favorite bourbon all the time. And I've fallen victim to it where, man, I got to snatch up a case or two of that.
Bunker
I come back.
Yeah,
for sure.
All right, so I guess the last question I'll pose to you, and since you know the brands, you know it well, you're highly educated in all this. So if you have to have a staple Wild Turkey bottle on your shelf, which is the one you go for?
Yeah, you got to go for Rare Breed, no doubt about it. That's it takes all the love that people have for 101, Wild Turkey 101, the traditional product, but it enhances it by being barrel proof and having the different ages in there. So that's the one I would go for sure. It's one you don't want to rush through, because you have a few of those, they'll catch up on you. But if you're just sitting around and you want something to ease the pains of the day a little bit, Rare Breed's the one to go with.
See, there you go, Ryan. Now you can deal with your twins with a little bit of Rare
That's
Breed.
right. Can I get a case?
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you again for being on the show today. This was very intriguing, a great insight into Wild Turkey. This is yet another checkbox for another brand we have on the show.
Good.
Yep, we did it finally.
All right.
No, I'm glad you came. It's been a long time begging you. I tried to beg you when you're at Beam, and now we got you at Wild Turkey.
I'm glad, man. I'm glad. Well, I'll be back next week. We just keep doing it, right?
Absolutely. Hey, as long as you keep bringing bottles, you're invited.
Man.
So
Well, I appreciate it, y'all.
So if you like what you hear, make sure you subscribe to us on iTunes. You can also follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Bourbon Pursuit. You can also like us on Facebook.
Yeah, and if you have any guest suggestions, feedback, please let us know. We're keeping this thing rolling and trying to do a better job than the last one. So we'll see you next time.